Hey everyone, welcome to a deck tech addendum. So I strongly recommend you watch the deck tech I put out this morning, which was Rhys the Redeem's Unity Army, which was a commander deck tech, and I went over all the details of that deck. I went into detail of every card selection. This is an addendum to that deck tech, which I mentioned during that video. And basically I made an alternate version of that commander tech, but instead of generating tokens of all kinds, I pretty much made a version that generated elves, and there was more elf synergy. So this is the elf synergy version, Rhys the Redeem's Elf Army. That's what I'm calling it because I'm very creative, of course. And we're going to go through the differences more than anything else. I'm not going to go through all the same cards again. There's really no point. I strongly recommend you go through the video this morning. That's way more in depth. And if you're really interested in the Elf Army, you can go through this later, or you can just skip it. Really your call. Just letting you know. Before I do, please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and please hit that subscribe button as well. I would really appreciate it. The few seconds that it takes you to do that really go a long way in helping out the channel, helping me out, helping others find my content as well. Would really, really appreciate it. Alright, so we're playing with Rhys the Redeemed. Awesome card, awesome elf as well, which is always nice, and it has two powerful abilities, especially its second one. So the token generators, everything's been thrown out from this morning's deck tech, except for Battle for Redguard. That one made it, mostly because it also creates an elf warrior creature token, but everything else has been removed. Actually, as well as Assure and Assemble. So, alright, my bad, mea culpa, but everything else is new. So let's go through each and every one of them. Hunting Triad, create 3 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. Alright, for 4 mana, you're creating 3 elf tokens. Those are awesome. You're creating tokens, which is what you want to do in this deck. And if you have a pump spell out or a pump creature out, which we'll be getting into in a second, those are going to be pretty big elves pretty quickly. That's always nice. You have a reinforce option as well if you really wanted to, because you put 3 1/1 counters on target creature. This is also useful. It could be some combat trick if you're in a pinch, but you mostly want to cast it for its main ability, which is creating 3 bodies, 3 tokens. Elvish Promenade, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token for each elf you control. Complete bomb. You do this mid to late game or whenever you have a sufficient amount of elves on the battlefield, and then poof, all of a sudden you're doubling your army essentially, which is nuts, which is crazy. And of course, if you have parallel lives or doubling season or something out, it just gets out of hand really, really quickly. Elven Ambush as well, coming out in Kaldheim. Create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token for each elf you control. Essentially the same thing, almost word for word. Actually, I'm reading each of them now. Yeah, pretty much word for word as Elvish Promenade for the same amount of mana. So you have 2 of those abilities. One is a tribal sorcery. Whatever, tribal doesn't really matter. The other one's an instant. So now you have it at instant speed. Huge power up. You could play both of them. Super happy about that. Gilt Leaf Ambush. So put 2 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens into play. Clash with an opponent. The clashing part is really not the point why I'm playing this. I just wanted more cards that generated tokens. Just created 2 bodies, so I really liked that aspect. If you get the clash win, I guess that's a bonus, but it's really not why you're doing it. Already covered Battle for Redguard in this morning's video, so check out that video for more. List Alana Huntmaster. I used to play with this in my casual elves deck. It was awesome. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Alright, so you got a bunch of elf creatures in this deck, which we'll be getting to, but go back a second here. Elvish Promenade, Hunting Triad, those are tribal sorceries, which means those are elf spells, so they also count. Very, very cool synergy there. It's just another way to create more and more elves. Very, very cool. I just love this creature. Then you have Freylees, Linoir's Fury. So +2, create a 1/1 green elf druid creature token with add 1 green to your mana pool. So you're creating mana dorks essentially, which is useful. And if you're able to duplicate them with a duplicating ability, well, then you're creating a bunch of ramping creatures, which is perfect. -2, destroy target artifact or enchantment for added removal, or -6, draw a card for each green creature you control. Alrighty then. Well, I think it's going to be relatively easy to get that -6, and drawing a bunch of cards in Commander, well, drawing a bunch of cards in any format, really, but it's going to be nuts. Nuts. The -6 ability, I think, is totally doable, especially if you have a bunch of creatures that can help defend, protect Freylees on Linoir's Fury. I really like this addition. Wolverine Riders, another relatively new addition. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to its toughness. So you're gaining life every time an elf is entering the battlefield, including your duplicated tokens, of course. And at the beginning of each upkeep, you're creating an elf. So it's a token generator and a life gain gainer in one. Has a 4/4 body, so it dodges some removal. Of course, it's going to be a major target because if you have this and growing ranks or this parallel lives or whatever it may be, again, tokens get out of hand really, really quickly, and they're all elves, so there's synergy here. Elvish Warmaster, another new card. Whenever one or more other elves enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. It only triggers once each turn. Alright, well, it's not the end of the world, you can't super abuse it, but it's another way to create more and more elves. And for 7 mana, elves you control get +2/+2 and gain Death Touch on the turn. Well, not the biggest thing in the world, but actually in this deck, 7 mana is not the hardest thing either. So being able to pump up all your elves and getting them Death Touch is going to be some brutal combat math and just combat decisions in general. I like that. Elderleaf Mentor. Whenever Elderleaf Mentor enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Simple as that. Simple as that, everybody. Nothing more to it. Probably a card you can switch out to something else that you like instead, but I wanted more elf creatures, and this was a nice way to fill that in. Now I'm going to go back on what I just said. Conclave Cavalier is not an elf, but what I really like about this is that it's a 4/4 vigilance, and when it does die, eventually, create two 2/2 green and white elf creature tokens with vigilance. So you're creating elves, they're 2/2s, and they have vigilance. I really like that 2-for-1, essentially. And realistically speaking, since they are tokens, they're worth more than if they were just 2/2 creatures. Because again, they're tokens, you can duplicate them. They're going to get synergy from other elves that you have in this deck. Yeah, it's just, I think Conclave Cavalier is actually a pretty cool addition, despite the fact that it not being an elf. Your token duplicators don't change, except I'm not playing Tristani Celestine's Voice anymore. Just needed more space. The +1 counter generators as well, more or less the same, except I'm not playing Shalia or Clonian Hydra, because again, needed more space. We're playing a lot more elves in this deck. The pump, the first 5 pump spells are the same, so I won't go through them. If you want more information, go to this morning's video. But we also have Wiltleaf Liege, which I really like. It's an elf creature, and it basically pumps up all your other elves. Let's just be honest here. Gives them all +1/+1, and for those sweet spot elves that are white and green, they're getting +2/+2, which is nuts. This other ability is not super important, but yeah, it's just giving +1/+1 to all your elves. Pretty awesome. Elvish Archdruid, of course. Other elves you control get +1/+1, another pump creature, but it also has a very cool ability, which is add 1 mana to your mana pool for each elf you control. So you, unchecked, you can generate an insane amount of mana early on or even late game and cast some pretty big spells. Immaculate Magistrate, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature for each elf you control. Alright, well, this also makes things interesting, because your opponents are going to be worried about letting through any creatures, because any creature that goes through, well, they are a prime target for Immaculate Magistrate, because you're all of a sudden, they're going to become a little 1/1, and it might become a 15/15, or 20/20, whatever it may be. It's going to become a big elf, and all of a sudden it's going to be dealing direct damage to your opponents. So I really like Magistrate for that reason alone. Jorga Warcaller, multi-kicker. Alright, Jorga Warcaller enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each time it was kicked. So you definitely want to cast it kicked. Let's just be clear here. Other elf creatures you control get a +1/+1. Get +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on Jorga Warcaller. Alright, so let's just get this straight here. You can generate a lot of mana. You have many ways to have counters be duplicated when they're placed on your creatures. And yeah, you have Jorga Warcaller that also pumps up all your creatures based on the amount of counters it has on it. Not sure how crazy you think this is, but however crazy you think it is, it's way crazier. I'm not even talking about its interaction with Immaculate Magistrate here, which makes things even worse. So if you manage to get these two on the battlefield, I don't see how the game's going to last much longer for your opponents. Imperious Perfect. Other elf creatures you control get +1/+1. Very nice. For 1 green, tap, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Actually a pretty cheap token generator compared to other abilities that we've seen here, so I'm pretty happy about that. And last but not least, Elvis Champion. That's your basic other elf creatures get +1/+1 and have Forest Walk. So if you have another player playing green, they are screwed. The ramp stays the same, except we're not playing Secret Tribe Elder. You need space. The removal, also the same, except we're also playing Sprouting Renewal here. So that's Convoke, which is useful, I suppose. Choose 1 creature, create a creature, 2/2 green and white elf knight. Cool. Another elf that's green and white, which is relevant here. Or destroy target artifact or enchantment. So I just like the ability of being able to choose. I like that. Token or destroy. The rest, also the same, not much changed. The tutors stayed the same, not much changed. And the lands stayed the same, not much change. So this is the addendum to this morning's deck tech. I really suggest that you go watch that first, or maybe after as well, to understand what I was doing here. But this was my first foray into Commander, so I'm really looking forward to all of your input into what you thought, what you want to see out of my deck techs for Commander decks. I am a primarily modern player, I'm a primarily modern channel, but I am getting into Commander to make it kind of a secondary format that I feature often enough to make it interesting for you Commander freaks out there. So yeah, I would really like to get your feedback on this, and I would like to hear from you. Also, more Commander deck ideas. I would love to hear from that. You know, the Commander you want me to build around, whatever it may be. I'd love to hear from you from that. So if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe, hit notification bell. That stuff really helps me out a lot. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook as well. Also helps me out. You could also stay up to date with everything that I'm doing. If you want to join my growing Patreon community, I would really appreciate you check out the link in the description. Set up some pretty cool tiers. All the information is there, but essentially you get some of your money back at the end of every year. Really, really cool. Patrons currently like it from what I've heard, so check that out. Thanks, and have a good one.